Hi there. I'm the CEO of Mailgun, Will Conway. I'm so excited about sponsoring this conference with Iterable. It's been a fantastic streamlined conference. Can we just give a round of applause for how great this thing has been so far to the Iterable team? Man. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking to you guys. You know, they're the real experts. They're who you actually want to talk to. I really just wanted to introduce a little bit, give you guys a little bit of an introduction on Mailgun, and then talk to you about what these guys are going to offer up in this session. So Mailgun's strategy is actually really straightforward. We are looking to be the very best API email platform in the world. And then we're partnering with the very best front-end platforms in the world so that collectively we can win the inches together. Now, what that focus has really allowed us to do is do things like have the highest bursting SLA in the industry at 750,000 emails per minute. It allowed us to publish our validations, our email validation API about 2 years ago, which was actually an open source project before that was solving exclusively for checking the syntax. And of course, having the most comprehensive deliverability infrastructure and tool set of any ESP. So what Nick's going to come up and talk to you about a little bit today is really, start by challenging your thoughts on, how important deliverability is to the success of your business. And then Patrick's going to come up and talk a little bit about how that is manifested in their company, and then also how they're using data to really win those inches. And then finally, we're email nerds. This is what we do all day, every day. We have a lounge. I'm sure you guys have seen it on the second floor. We'd love for you guys to come out and just throw your hardest email problems at us, ask your hardest deliverability questions, and just get some free advice while we're all out here. So with that, I'll introduce Nick Schafer, who is one of our oldest and most good-looking deliverability engineers.
Well, thank you, Will, for thinking I am good-looking. I appreciate that. So, as he just mentioned, we're email nerds. I am absolutely an email nerd, and I was listening to Jen Capstraw talk earlier, how we all get into it. It's really, we all just kind of fall into it. But whenever I fell into it, I became passionate about it, and that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years, and I really love doing it. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. He mentioned deliverability, but really the main question is, what are the most important factors driving your conversions? Because that's what you're after. You want to convert those leads into customers, and those customers into repeat customers. So the first thing we'll look at for what impacts those conversions is your email template. Is that the most important thing? A lot of people think your email template is one of the most important factors, and it is absolutely important. Is it responsive? Is it rendering well across mobile devices and browsers, all browsers? Is it visually appealing and on brand? Those are all important things, but really it's not the most important thing. How about your content? In this example, we see Tory Burch. They do a great job of inviting users and getting them excited about the brand. Is it engaging? That's something you have to ask yourself when you're creating your content. Does it push towards the action you want people to take? Is it clear? A big one, you want to make sure there's no misspellings in the content. That would be very embarrassing for you. I'm sure it's probably happened to some of y'all. I think it's happened to us a few times. Again, this is really important, but it's not the most important thing. How about your list size? I can't tell you how many times I've heard customers say, if I add even more people to my list, I'm going to get better results. It makes sense, right? The math, you send to more, you have a better chance of getting engagement. It's not really true, though. Your list in terms of how engaged those users are in that list, that's really what matters. How healthy is your list? That's what I like to call it. I look at dashboards all day. I'm, again, an email nerd. I have something called list health. I look for things that would indicate problems with the list. Someone with a list of 1 million users could be sending out to that full list, where someone with 50,000 users could be getting much better results. It's all in the health of your list. I know we all want big email lists. but you also do got to make sure like it's healthy. Again, this isn't the most important thing. While it is important, not the most important. So that leads us to here. The two most important things, deliverability and data. So I'm talking about the deliverability side, obviously. Patrick's going to come up here in a second and talk about the data side. You know, an important thing, I still say this, I want to think it's obvious, but it's not always. You know, in a lot of dashboards that, you know, customers look at, they'll see 99% delivery rate, something like that, and they think they're okay. So you got to understand the difference between delivery and deliverability. Delivery is your messages getting accepted at the gateway, accepted by recipient mail servers. Deliverability is looking at, you know, the inbox rate. How often are you hitting your users' inboxes? Far different things. So don't be blind to, you know, possible issues when you see 99% delivery in a dashboard that you're looking at. So why is deliverability so important? You know, a big one, loss of revenue. It's been great chatting with Patrick these last couple days, and you know, a couple weeks ago when we were preparing for this, but you know, he actually has an example of whenever they made a change with an email service provider. They saw, you know, a few percentage point dip in their deliverability, but what that equated to over the course of a quarter was millions of lost revenue. So small changes in deliverability can have a real impact. You know, another thing, wasted marketing efforts. Those first two slides I showed, you know, your template, your content, that's what y'all are really good at. But you can create the best content, the best templates, and if it's not getting through to an inbox, really all that is for naught, and you know, you're just going to be frustrated. So that's an extremely you know, important point to kind of key in on, because you don't want to be spending time doing all this and then just wasting, having your efforts be for nothing. Increased support. This is interesting because I actually had a conversation with a gentleman last night at the happy hour. He talked about how their customers reach out to their support team whenever they don't receive messages. This is common with transactional messages. Should those messages you know, be getting filtered as junk, those users, it's funny, people don't check the spam folders. Raise of hands, do y'all check spam folders? I know before I got into email, I didn't check spam folders. I do now, and I actually do a lot of research in it. Again, email nerd coming out. But yeah, that's a real impact. You know, your brand is going to be impacted by that too. Your users seeing messages filtered into the junk folder, that doesn't look good on you. And customer loyalty. If all those drip campaigns for the customer lifecycle aren't reaching them, you're not building the customer loyalty. So again, extremely important. So now that we know it is important, which I think all of y'all already knew this, but the real question is how can you boost your deliverability? At Mailgun, we do this via analytics, and not just, you know, normal analytics. It's obviously helpful to look at overall numbers. How are you doing overall? You know, you can look at, again, 99% delivery, but the important thing is what's your overall open rate? What's your overall click rate? But on top of that, you need to drill into the data. You need to look at things like delivery performance across mailbox providers. That screenshot is from our analytics tab. This points out, you know, possible issues. Overall, you might be fine, but like in this example, Gmail's a little down compared to the others. That's something that once you know that information, you can go in, drill into the data, and see if you can uncover where the problem is. Spam complaint rates, same thing. Complaint rates are the number one thing that's going to, you know, get you on the radar of mailbox providers. So really, you know, always keep an eye on that. I'm sure all of you do, but you know, if you get an increased complaint rate, I can guarantee you Gmail is noticing and could start doing something. Engagement metrics, again, opens and clicks. It's important to really know how you're doing on that front. Domain and IP reputation, that's something that, you know, whether you're using a dedicated IP or shared IP, it's a little bit different. Shared IPs, obviously, you can be impacted by other senders, right? Dedicated IPs, they're yours. So anything that's going on with the IP is really related to something you're doing as a sender. But you need to understand what's going on with them. You need to monitor blacklists, things of that nature. So another way to boost deliverability, and this is something that I spend a lot of time, this kind of goes into the list health check that I was talking about earlier. Can't tell you how many times I've seen typo addresses in legitimate senders' mailing lists. .con happens all the time instead of .com, Gmail, Hitmail. There's all kinds of stuff that gets into address lists or mailing lists. With our email validation API, there's two ways you can use it. The best way in my mind is to integrate it with your sign-up forms. You integrate our API into your forms. Users on your website typing in their information or on the app, you can use the API to basically do a little pop-up that says, did you mean? So it prevents those typos from happening. And again, this is something I see day in and day out. It is something that is real and happens all the time. The other way is cleanup. If you have built a list over time, you need to go back through, validate addresses. You can also use it in that way. But really, I mean, putting it at the front door, making sure those addresses are valid at the point of entry is really key here. This one's not sexy, but it's important. You need to check all things email infrastructure. Get new IPs, you need to warm them up. Don't start blasting messages right away on new IPs. We have an automated IP warm-up feature that really helps with this. You don't have to do anything. You just start sending, and we will reroute some traffic through a different IP while we warm up your IP. Always ensure the authentication stuff. DCOM SPF, that's really important. DMARC, you should all protect your domains with that as well. Get rid of bottlenecks, kind of like what Will mentioned earlier. Our rapid fire feature allows for this. You can send out a lot of messages in a very short period of time. 750 million or 750,000 in a minute, I think is what he said. That's something that helps. Bottlenecks do happen, and they can have a real impact if you need to get messages out within a certain time frame. Again, monitor blacklists regularly. There's a lot of blacklists out there. They aren't all important, though. If you have questions about which ones you should not care about, come see us in the lounge. I will be happy to nerd out with this kind of stuff. There was a blacklist the other day that got shut down and listed the whole world, if y'all want to chat with me about that. And finally, partner with experts. That right there in the middle, 44x ROI. I've read reports of things like this all the time. Email could get you upwards of 44 to 1 return on investment. So for every dollar spent, you could see $44. You're all large, successful companies who value email so much that you're coming to a conference to learn more about email and other marketing channels on top of that. You've chosen an extremely robust email system in Iterable, and email is likely contributing millions of dollars to your revenue. Of course, I'm a deliverability engineer, so I believe in my value, but I come across enough companies that are really blind to their deliverability performance. They don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So really kind of moral of the story is if you need help, let us help with the deliverability side. Deliverability is hard. You're really good at crafting awesome messages, awesome templates. Let us help you with the deliverability side so that all that work you put into it is recognized. And with that, I'm going to introduce Patrick from Talent Inc. He's going to talk to you all about data.
Great job. Hi, everybody. Data is not magic. I'm going to get into a couple of anecdotes about my own company, but I want to set the stage and set some expectations that using the wrong data or using data incorrectly can often be worse than not using data at all. So I am the co-founder and chief product officer of Talent Inc. We are an on-demand network of HR professionals that rewrite resumes, LinkedIn profiles. We offer interview advice and career coaching. Our flagship product is called Top Resume, and as you might have guessed, we're in the resume game. Our customers are typically job seekers that spend a few $100s to work one-on-one with somebody in our network. They will look at the syntax, the grammar, the English, the formatting on the resume. They'll draft an upgrade, hand it back to the customer, and hopefully they take that resume and ride off into the sunset with the job of their dreams. So our job is a little bit tricky. First, not everybody is aware that a service like this even exists. It took me about 60 seconds to even explain it to you. So we have to educate people. And it takes a while to do that. And if we can actually convince people that our product they understand what it is, then we have to convince them that it actually works. Are they going to get more interviews? Is it worth buying? Then once we do that, we have to convince them to part with a few $100s, and the sticker shock is real. So this is not an impulse buy. So we don't benefit from a lot of the traditional email marketing techniques that most people do. And we are basically in the game, we work really, really hard on the long game. One of the things we do is we have a free tool that people use to analyze their own resume. And as a result, behind almost every one of our leads, we've got a resume and the parsed information in bits behind it that we can use to target people. So what do we do with that data? Going back in time, about 6 or 7 years ago, I am an engineer. As we were building out the first version of this, I was managing Linux servers with SendMail and Postfix, and was really looking for an ESP that was reliable, but still gave me bare metal control over all of the things that I wanted to in email. And Mailgun was a fantastic partner in this, and still is today. We also had built an A/B testing framework that was testing some of the usual things like subject lines, but we got a little bit more nuanced around send times, senders, even the speed with which we were sending email. And Mailgun was also fantastic there as well. Fast forward a few years, and we were in the market for an automated marketing platform that could replace our homegrown solutions so that our non-technical people could really be unleashed into the world. And as Nick mentioned, we struggled a little bit. You know, we got really close with a couple a few percentage points, but that amounted to a lot of money lost. So we kept our homegrown solution, and it's still part of our ecosystem today. Not long after that, we partnered up with Iterable once we got this resume data sorted out. And we now pipe all of the resume data and the backing into the user profiles in our Iterable and augment our homegrown solution so we have non-technical people doing amazing things with the resume data, and our homegrown solution makes us our money. Because people are opting in for a free service, they're expecting it right away. Our initial open rates are 80+%, bordering on 90%. We don't take that for granted. In the beginning of the company, we spent a lot of time just hard selling these people, and it worked. It worked at least well enough to launch the company. But we realized once we shifted to more conversational tone, we were able to triple the lifetime value of each of these leads. So how do you cater your message to that specific person? What do you do with that data? What do we do with our resume data? I'll start with a story that's a little bit embarrassing, kind of funny in retrospect. We were a little naive back then. Once we figured out how to parse resumes and we could identify, or at least guess people's industry, we identified a cohort, nurses, that were converting at much lower rate than the rest of the general population. So we looked closer and we said, fair enough, nurses don't really trust that we know how to write resumes specifically for them. There's some nuance in that. We don't advertise that we do that, but we do have experts in our network that can write nursing resumes. So we rolled out fancy landing pages. We tailored products specifically to nurses and warmed up our hands, hit the button, go, and the test completely tanked. We thought we'd do at least as well as the baseline. And we thought that was really strange, did some head scratching, we dug into the data. I remember one resume in particular, somebody had listed that they babysat in high school, and that was flagged as nursing through applicant tracking systems and our own machine learning. So what happens? You give a terrible first impression, you're making an assumption about somebody that has nothing to do with who they actually are, and they're turned off and you lose them pretty much forever. So what did we do? We flipped the script. We started an email conversation. We said, hey, the computer thinks you're a nurse. Is that right? If not, let's talk. And immediately, conversion rates went way up. And so through this transparency, we're able to start a conversation. Notice we're not even talking about buying at this point, and people have said, what else does it say about me? How do we make our email more conversational? We like to alternate coming from a corporate address or a persona. The persona is especially useful in the job-seeking market. Job seeking is kind of a solitary and lonely process, so having somebody to reach out to is a great opportunity. We also have a couple of tactics that work really well for us. We have a weekend cadence where we introduce a value prop on Thursday. We drill in some urgency on Friday, and then we cap it off with a final offer on Monday. That works really well for us. And then last, sorry, next slide. How do we actually start this conversation? What are we doing if we're not convincing people to buy? So first, we use some machine learning on the resume to try to guess where people are in their job search, in their life cycle. As I mentioned, we try to guess their industry, things like that. We offer up very tailored case studies with video testimonial, people that look like you, make you feel less lonely, that this thing worked for you, and that we have an expert that can solve your problem. But my favorite CTA that we have is email me with questions. And we will send out lots and lots of emails that just say, just ask me, like, here's something, let's start a conversation. Now, we had to build up an infrastructure, and we have a fleet of people to answer these questions. But the ROI is fantastic, and people really enjoy the conversation. And once, you can imagine that once somebody emails you, they convert really well. Honesty. Honesty is, I have an anecdote about honesty that's really interesting. A small percentage of our resumes, our tool deems what we call nearly perfect, and we explicitly tell people, you probably don't need to buy our product because your resume is good enough. When we added this, these people convert as well as the people that don't have perfect resumes. And they went from, we actually increased conversion rates just by being honest and open. That was a big win for us, and we've kind of used that as a playbook throughout. Now, many of you don't have a data set that's as rich as a resume or the parsed data that comes from a resume, but there's some things that we do that I think are kind of universal. One, shopping cart abandonment is kind of the standard in e-commerce, but it is a home run for us. We see a lot of revenue there. We also look at abandonment on content. So somebody reads something evergreen on one of our long-form blogs, we'll drill them with a small drip campaign that reiterates the value prop, and then eventually try to sell them later. Purchase history, obviously somebody that opens their wallet once are more likely to do it again. In our case, it really helps to, we have a short time frame when somebody spends a few $100s on something. It's very easy to convince them to spend another 25, 50, 100 on something. Email is a great tool for that. But the last and maybe the favorite thing I think we've done as a company, we did try to use this machine learning, like I said, to try to guess what people are thinking and where they are in the job search, and we can tailor our message accordingly. But it wasn't doing great. As I mentioned, the nursing example, but there's a lot of other examples where we got close, but we were turning some people off. So we ran an experiment where we just asked people the questions that we wanted answers to. We literally just emailed them and said, where are you in your job search? Are you comfortable with your interview skills? How confident are you that your resume is ready? And a couple of magical things happened. One, 10% of people answered more than a dozen questions. So we could target them. We knew exactly what data was, we knew that the data was absolutely correct. So we could target them with anything that we wanted. Two, the remaining 90% were much more easily trained because we had a baseline with which to work. And third, and maybe the most surprising, these people actually converted better once we asked them questions. So we sent them an email to ask questions, we got more data, and we got more revenue out of it. And I think in bringing it back to email and kind of to recap, we have accidentally become successful through deliverability. It's really core to what we do. It's part of, like I said, we're in it for the long game. We're all about conversations. But like I said, accidentally, people responding to emails, people having conversations around our emails has really helped our deliverability. And I think if you're open and honest and trustworthy, you can build the trust of your customer, you build the trust of the ISPs. When you're really ready to sell or capture that final CTA, you've got everybody ready to do so. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, we have some time for some Q&A. So let's bring everybody up from Mailgun. And then we've got a question over here.
So how would you approach re-engaging customers who've been, or actually leads who've been inactive for a long period of time, let's say on a product launch?
A little louder.
How would you approach re-engaging leads who've been inactive for, a long period of time, let's say, for a product launch from a deliverability standpoint?
Yeah. This on? Okay, there we go. Yeah, no, that's a great question. The question, if y'all didn't hear, was how do you approach re-engaging, users that have become inactive for an extended period of time? Obviously you got to be careful with it because these users, can impact your reputation. Obviously, you want to maybe do something special, something that you wouldn't normally do. Maybe a enticing offer that you wouldn't send to your traditional users. I think an important step here, though, is to also kind of review the data. Make sure there wasn't any kind of issue with how it was captured in the first place. Because honestly, from what I've seen, there's a lot of bots out there that attack forums. So you do need to do that kind of due diligence to make sure it's a legitimate address in the first place. I mean, they can be active on your site, but maybe they put in a bad address. Also, that's something that you should take a look at. So I think checking the health of that address first of all, but offer something enticing to get them back in.
Any other
I think
questions?
the key there is just knowing that any interaction that you have with somebody that hasn't followed up with you is a bit of a gamble. So you just know that, if you don't provide some kind of value with that reintroduction, then you're putting the reputation of your IPs and your domain at risk. So it's absolutely a best practice, and everybody should be doing it. But it's just don't be lazy about it. That's really what it comes down to. Don't just go out and put, we're going to email, we're going to touch these people 7 times. That's like the standard that we hear most often. If you're not adding value in some capacity somewhere down that chain, if not at the very beginning, then you could really be depreciating your own deliverability, your reputation. And then when you go and send out to new folks, it's going to be bad. So the key is just make sure you're adding value.
All right, we have another question.
This is for Nick. Chris Arundale says hi, by the way.
Oh, hello, Chris.
You mentioned your API for validating bad keystrokes and so forth. Is that just for Mailgun customers or customers who are backed by your platform like Iterable, or is that open to everyone?
That is open to everyone. Yep. You can actually use the validation API without sending through our platform. So if you just need to do some validations, you can use Mailgun for that.
All right, another question?
We got another.
Oh, perfect.
Hey guys, thanks for this talk. Hey Patrick, what's the best way to get on one of your email journeys so we can see your work in action for ourselves?
Sure. You can go to topresume.com and upload your resume and try to use our free tool, and you'll see it in action there. If you engage a lot with our site, you're going to get a lot of great content. So you decide if you want to use the vanilla path or if you want to go down the busy path.
Thanks.
All right, I think that's all the time we have for questions. Let's give him a round of applause.